Alright, so this is Bryce for StocksPoker.com, and this was going to be the first in a series of videos I'm doing which are going to take a look at Limit Hold'em blind play. Before I get started here, I would like to take a moment to go on a couple quick tangents to talk about Limit Hold'em. And the first thing I would like to mention is that in Limit Hold'em, and particularly in short-handed Limit Hold'em, most of your expectation does come from play in and around the blinds. And the reason for this is because most players actually play pretty well when the hand ranges are tight. And to give you an example of that, let's say a player raises under the gun in a 10-handed game. Well, he can only be playing very few hands, and even very few poor players will be aware of that. So when playing against that player under the gun, when he can only have a few hands, there are very few decisions that can actually be made, and even a poor player is going to do a fairly decent job of selecting what hands to play against the under the gun raiser, and will do a fairly good job of making his post-flop decisions as well, because there'll be very few decisions to be made. Mostly he'll just be playing fit or fold. And so when the ranges are tight, there's less of a difference between the expectation of a good player and a poor player than when the ranges are wide. And so in the later positions, particularly in and around the blinds when the hand ranges are widest, there is a much bigger difference between the expectation of a strong player and a poor player than is in the earlier positions when the hand ranges are tight. And that's just because when the hand ranges get wide, there is much more room for interaction, and you start having to consider more advanced things like the information you have of your opponent will start affecting your decisions. It won't be dictated by the fact that your opponent just always has good hands. You'll start having to considering things like how your actions may affect future actions, and in general, the hands just become much more interactive and much more complicated. There are simply more decisions to be made, and in poker, where profit basically amounts to making better decisions, the stronger player does a lot better in wide hand range environments, just because there are more decisions and more complicated decisions to be made. And so this series of videos will be split into three major parts. And part one, which we're going to start taking a look at today, will look at stealing the blinds. Part two is going to take a look at defending the blinds with a call, and part three is going to take a look at defending the blinds with a re-raise. And before we get started with stealing the blinds here, I'm just going to go on another quick tangent and mention that I think one of the most common mistakes that people have always made and are still making today in Limit Hold'em games is that they defend their blinds far too seldom, and then partially because of that attempt to steal the blinds far too seldom as well. And there certainly are very many strong players who attempt to steal the blinds with a frequency that other players would consider to be very high. You know, they'll steal with a lot of hands. And while I believe that's correct, I don't believe it would be really effective to just sum this video up and say, well, I think it would be good for you guys to steal with a very wide range of hands. What I would like to show you guys